Hey team, I want to have a little bit of a chat about heart rate in relationship to your watts. I had athletes send a question, which is great. I love questions that I can provide a little bit of insight and hopefully that everybody gets some use out of. So the question was, and this comes up fairly often, is if heart rate is in a much lower zone than the watts are for the effort. So watts are immediate, right? We know that when, say, if you're going after a zone 4 effort, we want to watch at the beginning of any kind of rep, you're watching your watts. It's really easy to overdo the watts, and it takes heart rate time to respond. So it's usually after 90 seconds, things start to shift and respond, and certainly a little bit later, after 2 minutes and into 3 minutes into a rep, heart rate starts to respond. For some athletes, it can actually even take a couple of reps for heart rate to start to respond, especially depending on the fatigue level going in. So if you're a little bit tired, sometimes it can take a few reps for the heart rate to start to respond. So when we're doing really hard efforts early on, it's important to watch those watts if you have them. If you don't have watts on your bike and if we're talking in terms of pace on the run, you're dialing in, okay, knowing what's my fatigue level going in, and is that going to suppress the heart rate just a little bit? And do I need to regulate based on knowing that it's going to take time for the heart rate to respond? So a couple things can happen. If the heart rate's running a little low, it could be, hey, I'm hitting these watts really, really easily. They feel easy and my heart rate is low. Perhaps we need to bump your zones up a little bit and actually push it a bit harder to get the heart rate response. It could be that it's just you're carrying a little bit of fatigue and we need to really monitor those watts. If you're still able to get the watts and the heart rate's running a little bit low, it could be very normal training fatigue that we're carrying and it's a little bit suppressed. It could be that if it feels super easy and we need to bump things up a little bit, then that's something that you want to take note of and say, hey, it actually feels easy. I'm hitting these watts super easily. Heart rate is staying even 2 zones below. So say you're going for zone 4 watts and heart rate's sitting at zone 2 and it feels super easy, we probably need to lift those zones for you a little bit. But if it is a matter of, hey, actually these felt pretty challenging and my legs were on point with in terms of perceived exertion, and I felt felt that in my breathing and everything, but heart rate wasn't responding, it's probably a little bit more fatigue. If you're finding that later on in a ride, it's getting harder to hold the watts. Say you're working on something like zone 3 and it's quite a long ride and it's getting later into a ride, or you're trying to hold steady effort top of zone 2 and heart rate's starting to plummet down and watts are starting to plummet down. That could be just overall fatigue settling in, but it could also be that we're a little bit low on nutrition. So we want to make sure that if the watts are also starting to fade and heart rate is decreasing, keep an eye on, hey, do I need a little bit of calories? Do I need some fuel here? Another piece of it is you start to see that heart rate is going up and watts are starting to go down. We call that decoupling, right? So heart rate's going up, watts are going down. Maybe we started out a little bit too hard, or if it's quite a bit later in a workout, maybe we're getting a bit dehydrated, right? That could be a sign when heart rate is spiking up if it's hot out and watts are really falling down. Do I need nutrition? Do I need hydration? Did I start out a little bit too hard? These kinds of things all come into play. So I always say we want to use our metrics the same way as when you drive a car, right? So when you're driving a car, you still got to look down the road and you got to drive the car. You're watching everything that's going on around you. You're responding to the lights, the traffic, driving the car the way that you need to get to where you're going. However, you're keeping an eye on the dashboard. You can see, okay, how's my gas tank? Is that full? What's my speed doing? All of the metrics there. Is my engine overheating? You're not staring just at your dashboard and focused only on that. Is my gas needle moving? What's my speed? No, you're aware. You have to actually drive the car. You're actually seeing what's going on in front of you, aware of your surroundings, taking the most important step, which is driving the car. But you're aware of all of your gauges. That's a really good analogy to look at it. Our data is the same. You use it differently at different times, different places. We know, okay, if it's going after an effort early on. Watts are immediate, pace is immediate, heart rate takes time to respond, depending on fatigue level, how long it can take to respond or how it responds could be different. Conditions affect that, whether you're at altitude, whether it's really hot out, these kinds of things, they also play a factor. Is your fitness improving and we need to actually bump up the zones? You know, all of these things play a factor. But the main thing that I see go wrong for athletes when executing sessions is that they forget that piece that heart rate takes time to respond, or that fatigue levels or nutrition can play a factor in how that heart rate is responding. So always watch, you know, is my pace and my heart rate, is my watts and heart rate relationship, how is that playing out? What is the effect there? And that'll determine on your pacing and how you might go about a session, what your feedback is, what the overall total load is looking at, where you are in your training week, in your training cycle, in relationship to your race. All of these things play a factor on how heart rate is going to respond in relationship to perceived exertion, as well as your actual direct pace and your direct watts, anything like that. So making sure that you're always keeping all of these things in mind. That lag in heart rate response, that is something that you're watching as you go. And if, say, you're on rep 3, 4, or later in a workout, you know, how is that changing? What feedback is that giving you? What do you need to tend to? What is it that we need to, you know, focus on? Do we now need to lift the effort on the watts and bring the heart rate down? All of these things. Do I need a little bit more hydration? So keep an eye on these things. Hopefully you find this helpful. That's going to help you execute your sessions better. Always good rule of thumb is always start out easier than you think and allow the heart rate to respond. Use perceived exertion and drive that car and drive that bike, drive that run. Use your athletic intelligence to dial into your body and your surroundings. Use that first as your primary, and then use the other pieces of the puzzle to cross-reference and execute your sessions in your races. Hopefully you found that helpful. Cheers.